Hi, this is Chris German from The Apartment Dealer. Welcome back to The Apartment Dealer Show. Today, I wanted to share with you highlights, the main talking points from our most recent Apartment Owners Educational Luncheon. Now, if you've never had the opportunity to attend one of our live events, you really have to make it to our next one. This venue, not because it's my event, but the way that I've structured this is the way that I would want to intake information if I were the student, if you will. So it's an afternoon, jam-packed, full of information, no sales pitches whatsoever. So each of the speakers who are pinnacles within their own arenas, whether it's the real estate attorneys, tax strategists, market forecasters, those from commercial lending and all the rest, each of them is a pinnacle in their own arena, many, many years of experience. That's why I invite these individuals specifically. And over the course of the time that they share with the audience, it's what they're sharing is, well, here's what you need to know today. Here's what's most important, given the challenges of the market or whatever the challenge may be in that specific arena, or what the opportunities are. Here's what you need to know. So number one, there's no sales pitches. Number two, fast-paced, a lot of information. We serve lunch. It's a great lunch. We've all had the experience of going to an event where the food is mass-produced and the food isn't that great. We keep using the same particular venue because the food, the lunch served is just top-notch and just a side bonus. But we present through lunch. We don't stop for lunch in appreciation of everyone's time, and we want to get in that much more information. So over the course of a few hours, attendees are voraciously taking notes. And then at the end of the event, as they've sat there and taken in this information and thought of additional questions that they had, or maybe they showed up to the event with a burning question on their mind, we run mics around the room. We also collect question cards. Everyone can write a question or two down, and we collect those cards. And we bring the panel up at the end of the event, and then we answer as many questions as we can. It just really is a treat. We hold the event twice a year. I hope you can join us at our next event, which will be in the fall. But for now, I wanted to share with you what were those main talking points. My goal here, as always, is to ensure you as the landlord are empowered. I understand that multifamily investments is not getting any easier. Being a landlord is not being any easier. I made the comment at our last event that as landlords, you and I, essentially we have a target on our back, whether it's from the politicians, the tenants, the courtrooms, or what have you. Unfairly, of course, but that's the reality. So how do we make a difference in this scenario? Education, the right information, and to make decisions based upon the facts, not emotion. The next few minutes you'll spend here watching this video, it's the facts. It's what is taking place in the market. Here's the reality, what's working. Here's how to succeed as a multifamily investor. I hope you find this video informative. I hope you feel empowered. I want to work alongside you as you own and manage your multifamily properties. I want to assist how I can. Education, I think, is one of the main things that we can offer here at the Apartment Dealer. And this event specifically, our live event, is just some of the best content that we're able to share with the landlords. Enjoy. Chris German from the Apartment Dealer. We need to understand how to operate our multifamily business within the confines of the restrictions that are of the current day and what is working. So I've been a student at the back of the room, being a landlord, my wife and I owning a portfolio of properties ourselves. So I've been able to take in over 100 hours of education, learning from the professionals that I've invited here today. And what I know is that you and I want to be successful investors. In order to do that, there's three main boxes that we have to be able to check. The first box is we have to know how to increase our cash flow today. Even with rent control and all the rest, there is still a way in most cities to vacate units, take back your units, and raise your rents above market. And we're going to discuss that over the course of this afternoon. The second box that you need to check is we need to build wealth over time, right? None of us signed up for multifamily just for calls in the middle of the night to be drug into eviction court. We signed up to be able to build wealth for ourselves and for those that we care about our loved ones. Well, so how do you do that in a market then when interest rates are rising, cap rates are falling, there's volatility in the market? We're going to discuss that this afternoon. The third box that we have to check is eventually we have to end at a point where we have overall financial security. Sounds simple. So what's the problem? Here's my first provocative statement of the afternoon. You and I, for having owned multifamily properties, we have a target on our back. You and I, simply by being housing providers today, the politicians and others have decided to put a target on our back that we should bear the brunt of the economic woes and tenant woes and all the rest. That's problematic. Second, if we don't adjust our strategy now, because the strategy of 20 years ago no longer works, what's going to happen is you're going to lose money, resources, personal time, and you're going to lose peace of mind. So in general, I would say owning multifamily properties is complex. And it will only continue to get that much more complex. You'll hear from Michael Brennan today, eviction attorney extraordinaire. You've seen him on my YouTube channel. He'll share with you just how complex things are going to get. What all of us are doing by purchasing and owning multifamily properties is we're building a financial legacy. And this legacy has three fundamental pillars. It's simple, but not easy. Maximization, growth, and preparing for tomorrow. The first pillar, maximize. This is the idea that the grass is not always greener on the other side. Are we truly maximizing the profits of the properties that we currently own by focusing in on key capital improvements so that we can raise our rents, if you follow the apartment dealer plan, typically about 15% above market? And what inevitably happens by doing that is that now you've increased the value of the property, your equity, and you're able to move on to pillar two. So for those of you that are subscribed to my YouTube channel, I'm curious, how many watched our videos on YouTube, our educational content, what have you? Fair amount of you. Excellent. It used to be just me and my mom watching those videos, so this is good. But what does Chris do? I walk you through my personal projects, full transparency. And aside of just showing you, how we make the units pretty and the finished materials, which we do, the last episode in those segments, I break down for you the financials. Here's what Chris spent on X, Y, Z. Here was the end rental rate. Here was the true rate of return. In other words, that the strategies that we suggest from this stage or on our educational platform, that they truly work. So that's pillar one, maximization. Pillar two, which is growth. Now, growth takes into mind the wonder of the world known as compounding. Simply said, a 10-unit property versus a 5-unit property in the same community will outpace that property in terms of income, growth, cash flow, equity, appreciation, tax deductions, and all the rest. And we're going to discuss, okay, well, how do we grow our portfolio over time? Third, prepare for tomorrow. This is for those individuals that are looking for an exit out of multifamily. You're beyond the phone calls and the day-to-day management, but you have capital gains facing you. You're not quite sure, do you pass on cash or properties to your heirs? And we're going to discuss that over the course of this afternoon as well. So the financial legacy. This is how we check those three boxes. Increase cash flow today. You're going to learn strategies how to do that today under the confines of rent control. Build wealth. We're going to understand growth and the benefits of that and why that has a direct correlation to our standard of living today. And then, of course, preparing for tomorrow. For many of us, we say that our financial goals are X in multifamily, and our actions say otherwise. And that's not a statement of judgment. That's an observation of working hand in hand with our clients. And they say, Chris, this is what I would like to achieve. And I'll say, show me what you've done over the last 10 years. And it hasn't been those actions that would bring about that end result that they're looking for. So how do I mean? I know there's three segments of investors in this room. There's those of you that are still currently working or running a business, like my wife and I, and you're buying multifamily properties so that one day in the future, the income from those properties will replace you as a working individual. But we buy a property, and boy, do we make that property look pretty. We paint the trim 3 and 4 times over. We get to know the tenants too well. And this property we bought as a stepping stone in order to get us onto bigger and better things. And we wake up 20 years later and we're sitting on the same property. The second segment of investors are those of you that your multifamily properties represent the vast majority of your retirement income. So any increase in income that you would see today is a direct correlation to your standard of living today. And for some of you, you didn't do a very good job raising your rental rates, yet your income was tied directly to your cash flow. And this is the number one statement that I've heard since 2019 in the passage of rent control. Number one statement I've heard from landlords. You know, Chris, prior to rent control, we used to not raise our rents much. We used to try to take care of the tenants. But now that they passed rent control, every year I'm going to raise it to the maximum because they've given me no option. Third segment of investors are those of you that you have bought properties over time, you got the cash flow to where you wanted it. This is your golden years of investing. You're living off the fruits of your labor. And I hear these comments, you know, Chris, we'd like to take more vacations. We'd like to get away more or fill in the blank. We'd like to X, but we'd hate to get a call from the tenants while we're away. So we just don't do that. In other words, they're allowing the buildings to dictate their lifestyle, not their lifestyle demand of the buildings, the return that they need. That's what I mean when I say that sometimes our actions do not align with our overall financial goals. The good news is that the cavalry is here. The individuals that I have assembled today to present from this stage are the pinnacles of their individual industries, and we're going to cover all facets of owning multifamily property.
Cost segregation is simply studying that property and taking the value of everything in your property and classifying it as a faster depreciation for 5 years or 15 years as opposed to 27 years. But the law changed in 2017, and instead of taking the 5-year property over 5 years, you can actually get 100% bonus applied in this tax year if you bought that property in the last 5 or 6 years. If you buy it in 2023, if you buy it this year, you still get 80% bonus, which is crazy. And I'll show you what those numbers look like. So here's what we look for in your property when we study it. The basic foundation, the roofing system, the AC cannot be accelerated. About 80% of any building cannot be accelerated. But these are the items that we look for and place value on that can be depreciated right away. And the 5 years, the interior components, cabinets, shelving, counters, etc. And then the 15-year are exterior items, parking lot, curbs, driveway, etc. So those are what we look for to put value on. And here is the actual results of a study we did of a Simi Valley condominium. You'll notice there's no 15-year because 15-year are the exterior items, driveway, parking lot. In a condo, they're owned by the association. So they're not owned by the property owner. So you'll see at the top, cost 5-year and 27.5-year. And then if you look at the very bottom, you'll see after taking out the land value, which you do not depreciate, what's left is $280,000. So we took that $280,000 and simply put everything into categories. And anything in the 5-year, you would normally take that $72,000 and take 1/5, 1/5, 1/5 for 5 years. But now with bonus, you can apply that $72,000, all of it, as depreciation expense this year, if it would benefit your tax situation.
Delaware Statutory Trust as a tax vehicle are actually fairly new. You see this thing is called a Revenue Ruling 2004-86. Anybody want to guess what year the DSTs came into being? 2004, not 1986. It's 2004, okay? So they're basically a little less than 20 years old, but in 20 years, law has become very solid on these DSTs. So now they're a very popular vehicle. And Revenue Ruling 2004-86 rules, and you're going to find in these DST programs that they're going to come with a tax opinion in the back of the program materials, and you're going to be looking at that to make sure they qualify. But they generally will. There's a couple fluky programs out there that look more like partnerships that you'd want to stay away from, but most of them are really solid. It is a fractional ownership structure, so to you, it might feel like you're getting involved in a partnership because you're going to have a company managing the program, a company that has helped to buy the assets that are inside of that DST, and then to you, you're going to be one of what might be 60 people or 120 people that all own this one property or this portfolio of properties that are inside of the DST. Okay, so that's something that you want to look at inside of a DST is understand that the structure moves you from active to passive. And that's important. When you looked at Chris's pillars, you see some of you are in that wealth accumulation phase, and you're going to go from the 4 unit to the 8 unit to the 16 unit. Others of you are in that, hey, it's time to preserve capital. And you might be using a DST more for the preservation of capital than you would ever use it for building capital. They're really not generally set up as being a capital building type vehicle. They're set up more to be a preservation vehicle.
So a game plan. What's an aggressive offensive game plan in a raising rate market coupled with cap rates falling? Renovating properties, adding ADUs, paying out current tenants, really getting aggressive. One other thing that we have to look at as well is everyone says, well, Gil, you know, I'm waiting for 4.5 to happen. I'm waiting for 4% to happen. What did it take for the market to get us 3.5 and 4? It took a global lockdown. So people were afraid enough that they bought treasuries, and it was such a demand for treasuries that the rates dropped to 3.5. Okay, so my point is taking a loan right now and looking at it, if you're only a 5-year window, also look at interest only. So we have interest only products that are fixed for the whole 5-year term. Okay, so taking an interest only product is akin to dropping your payment by 28%. Akin, because you're only paying the interest, which is the only portion that's tax deductible. So for example's sake, if the rate were 5.9, it's the same as 4.25 on your payment. Okay. Now, why would you do that? You would do that if your game plan is aggressive to improve the property, get maximum cash out, improve your property, renovate, improve, increase. Okay. So that's a good game plan. There's also bridge financing. So I work with a lot of syndicators that are going out and they're saying, look, the arbitrage between the cap rate and the interest rate is not a big spread. It's too tight. So what are they doing? And this is the beauty of multifamily financing, lending, and ownership. You can develop your own game plan to increase what? Your own value. If you increase rents, are you increasing value? Absolutely. That's the only business you can do that. You can have a game plan and really execute. Very simple. So a lot of these guys are going in, paying out tenants. They're getting aggressive. They're looking at garage conversions for ADUs. And I've seen some of their spreadsheets, and they changed a 4% cap rate into a 5.5 or 6% cap rate at the time, a year and a half in advance of execution. So they've been able to make a deal that poorly cash flowed, a strong cash flow building. Current market conditions. How many think rates are going to continue going up? Okay. My forecast is only for a quarter. So don't call me in 6 months as you're wrong, Gil. We're going to talk about 4 months. So let's talk about that. On January 30th, we hit a low. Well, let's talk about October 10th. We hit a high of 433 in the 10-year Treasury. That was our high. We predicted that we would go down to about 3.4. Our prediction hit. We actually went down to 3.39. At that point, we saw the market was going to bounce. We asked all our buyers and refinances to lock their rate. We were right. The rates went back up to 4% on the Treasury. Okay. We also told everyone that that is a dangerous position to be, because our pivot was 4.1. And if we surpass that pivot, we're probably headed to higher rates. Now, little did I know that our pivot would work. What I didn't know is our pivot worked because of a banking collapse. Okay. So my point is, it took how many billions of dollar losses for these banks to create now our rates, treasuries are back down to 3.3 and 3.4. So they dropped 60 bips. Take that in consideration. It took these bank fallouts for that to happen. Our prediction is that rates are going to stay in a sideways action. And if you see number 1 there on the bottom, that was the 3.3 I referred to. If you see number 2 on top, that's the 4.10 that we predicted to be the maximum. And now we're predicting a slight drop. Okay. Now we're going to be up and down. It's going to be a volatile sideways action for the next quarter. I predict we might hit 3% on a treasury. What does 3% on a treasury mean? 3% on a treasury means we're going to get rates probably at 5%. Okay. Okay. Now at 5% rate, if you take an interest only, that's akin to getting a rate of 3.5. Okay. So do I promote interest only? Absolutely, if you have an aggressive game plan. If it's just for cash flow, maybe it's not your product. But if you have an aggressive game plan, absolutely. So this is our prediction for the next quarter, that we're going to be sideways, and our low is probably going to be about 3% on a treasury. Today they're 3.6. Friday they were 3.3. So you can see the volatility. They're moving up and down every day. Okay. So Chris's chart showed the same thing we're going to talk here. Every 1% increase in loan amount is a decrease of 12% in value, and maximum loan amount, 12%. Okay. What do we do now? We want to capitalize. We want to play offense. If you play defense and you do nothing, if you play no offense, if you play no offense and do nothing, what can happen to you? Your city can change their rental conditions, number 1. Number 2, you have the issue of what? Inflation eating up at you as well. And rates will eventually be higher. This is a small window of opportunity. And I urge you to look at your conversion rates and take action. This is a nice time to get rates in the 5s. They can go up and probably will. We're not stopping inflation. This is only a little blank in the window of time.
What are unprotected evictions in the city of Los Angeles now? Well, as of call it February 1st, non-payment of rent is no longer a protected eviction in the city of Los Angeles under the city's moratorium. So in other words, the tenants have to pay their rent when it becomes due on time again. The problem with that is, while the city let theirs expire, the counties remained in place. And the counties has some nuances to it, but really the only people that are protected in the county of Los Angeles for non-payment of rent are low-income tenants, those who are at or below 80% AMI, and only if they have told you within 7 days of their rent becoming due that they were impacted by COVID. And I will give you a little bit of a definition of impacted by COVID. The way the county's moratorium is structured, to be impacted by COVID and have the protection from the moratorium, their household income has to have gone down by 10% over the 12-month period immediately preceding COVID. So in other words, from March of 2019 to March of 2020, that whatever the income they had, household income during that 12 months, if their income has gone down by 10% over that, or below that, I should say, then they are, and they're 80% AMI, they're protected. Interestingly, the COVID moratorium for the county specifically states that the decrease in household income has to be as a result of COVID. So I've talked about this for 3 years now, and so many people thought you couldn't do evictions during this 3-year period, and we did literally thousands and thousands of evictions in the city of Los Angeles due to these nuances. So again, the only protected people in anywhere in the county, all 88 cities, are those people at or below 80% AMI, whose household income went down below or 10% below what it was immediately preceding COVID. And if they've notified you in advance, or not in advance, but within 7 days of their rent becoming due, that they are unable to pay the rent due to COVID. So realistically speaking, how many people out there today are really still impacted by COVID? Almost none, right? COVID is, I don't want to use the phrase in the rearview mirror. It's not quite in the rearview mirror, but it is more or less completely behind us. And I think that that's why the motion that was put forward by the city a couple of weeks ago failed by Ms. Solis and Ms. Horvath. So that's the Los Angeles City moratorium in a nutshell. More or less, it's gone.
Tenants that have moved out and are no longer in the building, but left owing $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, is there any probability that can be recouped?
That's not an eviction question. I'm happy to answer it. The answer is when the tenant moves out and owes you money, they owe you money. It's a breach of contract and they owe you money, so you can sue them. And so when you sue them, you're suing them for damages. If you started an eviction, you were suing for possession and damages. If they move out, now you're just suing for damages. Yes, you can pursue them. The way you phrased your question is you asked if it's probable that you can get it. The answer is if they have money, you can get it. The biggest thing that a court can give you is a judgment for money, which then you can collect if you can find money or assets. So if they disappear into the night, you're not going to collect. But if they have a bank account, if they have a car, if they have a job, you can garnish their wages. The judgment is good for 10 years and can be renewed for another 10 years and can be renewed for another 10 years. So yes, you can collect if they have money. If you have a judgment against Bill Gates because he left owing you money, you'll collect. If you have a judgment against a person who's now sleeping on a park bench, you're not going to collect.
Mr. Burns, two-part question here. Recently, given the environmental devastation, 1031 exchanges have changed here somewhat for us in California. What are those changes?
Hello. We got rain, so that's good, right? So at the beginning of the year, California was going to get rain, so they declared a disaster. And then California got more rain, and they extended it. So initially, they extended your time deadlines to May 15th. They've currently extended them to October 16th. But the interesting thing about it is it applies to someone that sells their property like today. So if I'm just a resident of LA County or San Bernardino County or Riverside County or Orange County, I'm considered an affected taxpayer. So if I sell my property, I can extend right now it's basically 7 months. I can extend my 45-day identification period and my 180th day to October 16th. So it gives me basically 7 months to identify and close. It really, in the 23 years that I've been doing this, it's probably the best extension that I've ever seen for 1031.
Greg, give me that extension. Is the 45 days to extend is instead?
So if you close today, your 45th and 180th day would be October 16th. So
Both?
7 months.
Both.
So
you don't have to identify till the 180th day?
Correct.
Well, you got to close essentially by October 16th too. But
You got it both by the same time.
Right.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
So I'm going to reiterate that because a lot of times the number one concern of landlords is, well, if I sell my property, will I be able to find something else? Because you've heard that you only have 45 days to identify. That's true and not true, and we could meet in council about that. The 45th day does exist, but there's a way to extend that. But they have a one-time program that if you sell today, you have all the way until mid-October to identify what it is your next property would be. That's huge for those of you that are contemplating a 1031 exchange.